Hey guys, welcome to the Howdywood podcast. My name is Jeff Ham. I'm your host. And today I've got a special guest with me. His name is Anil. And I'm sorry, Anil, I am not even going to attempt to pronounce your last name. Would you go ahead and say that for me? What's your last name?
Last name is Sankaramanchi.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, we're here to talk all things indie film. And honestly, this is my first time meeting Anil. He reached out to me on Instagram, and I want to learn everything about what this guy is doing in the indie film world. As you guys know, the indie film community is kind of tight-knit, so it's pretty rare that I come across somebody that I haven't met yet in the indie film world. And it's cool because you were recommended to me by a friend who I work with all the time. Right. His name is Christian Kramer. Hopefully we'll get him on the podcast pretty soon. But man, go ahead and tell me what you do.
So I started off acting way back in 2011, and my break into the industry was, as most Texas actors do, we started off in like commercial world. And then slowly I transitioned into narrative shorts, and then I started doing features. And then that transitioned me in about the beginning of the pandemic, 2019. I had, so many years of experience being on sets here in America that my international filmmaker community, they were starting to increase the amount of productions they were doing, but they were kind of it was almost like guerrilla on the fly, right? Like they were just trying to figure it out as they go. And because they didn't have the same years of experience as me, I decided, okay, I'm gonna go on set and provide a helping hand wherever I can. That started off my career as a producer and filmmaker. So now I have this really interesting hyphenate of two markets, which is why we probably didn't run into each other, because a lot of my last couple of years have been in the production zone for international film right here in North Texas. And wow. That it has its own thriving independent community, and it doesn't intersect at all with the standard American fold where we don't send a lot of films to the film festivals. We don't really participate in the local community events, and that I'm trying to engineer them out of that mindset, because they're kind of one track minded of let's make a film, send it back home to India and see what we could get in terms of audience there. But I think the last film that we really tried to showcase to an American audience was at Diff Shorts from the previous year. And it wasn't this past year, the year before, not the Dill year. It was the one before that. And we submitted a dark comedy film that we shot almost entirely in a foreign language, but we obviously had subtitles. We submitted it just to see if the American market would be interested in that type of content. And we ended up winning Best in Texas. So
heck yeah, that's awesome.
I think the community members are very interested in kind of showcasing what we have in terms of our style and flavor, because our language, our form factor of film is now becoming more popular, especially in Texas. I was just looking at Cinemark's screenings. Out of the 30-something titles that they have running, 11 or so are Indian films, and of those 11, wow. 7 of them are Telugu films, which it's a fast-growing language in the North Texas region. And I think with language comes art, music, song, film. So I just wanted to open up a conversation dialogue, and what better place than the Howdy podcast? Because Howdywood, I think number one is an iconic name, right?
Thank you, appreciate it.
I really, really liked it. Yeah, that's why I wanted to hop on here and see what we could talk about, because I think there's a lot of ground we could cover.
Man, I will say, just not just in the North Texas community, but in the filmmaking community across the world, Indian films have become super. I mean, you got RRR. What's some of the other big ones? I mean, Netflix is we scroll through Netflix, my wife and I, and we'll find an Indian film, and we're like, man, this actually looks really good. I got to watch this, and it's fine if we watch it with subtitles. It is what it is. But there's a lot of foreign markets that are coming through that are pretty strong in the film community. And the one thing that I will say though about film coming out of India is the VFX.
We are the
absolutely insane.
Largest VFX house in the world, because we're the largest film market in the world, because we just have so many different industries, so many different languages. So we have technicians that are working round the clock. They do not have the time to sleep. And because we're so adept technologically speaking, our number one export from Hyderabad, which is our LA of sorts, our number one export over the last decade has been software engineers. So as you see the intersection of media and technology kind of happening, a lot of the people that really understand computer coding and how CPUs and GPUs really function are coming out of that space. So as you see sort of going into this new technological infrastructure, this vertical stack of this newer age technology with like modern filmmaking techniques, it's going to be in the space where people both love cinema and technology, and that's where we are. So India is 100%. I think I watched at a festival. I think I watched something called Devotion. It was it was one of those like Top Gun type films.
I know that movie.
When the VFX started rolling, I was like, oh, I know exactly where they went for this.
Yeah. I mean, you almost kind of. I mean, I think that it's the same if you watch a Marvel film or some of these. Like a lot of it's coming out of there, but I'll even because I do a lot of visual effects as well, and some of the best Houdini tutorials. Like I dig a lot in Houdini, and some of the best Houdini tutorials are in Hindi. And I'm like, that's frustrating to me because like the English ones, they want you to pay like $500 just to watch one tutorial on how to make a waterfall. But then all the Hindi tutorials, there's like hundreds of them and they're so much better and so much cleaner. And I have to watch it all with subtitles, which is really frustrating because even the nodes are in different languages.
Right.
And I'm like, what are you doing? I get lost a lot. But yeah, the VFX community coming out of there is absolutely bonkers, man. But so tell me a bit. So you do work in Dallas, but you also do work in India as well.
So the value that I have for India is that I'm based here. So I rarely ever go back over there. What they do is they typically hire me on to be sort of this like almost like culture consultant on sets that happen here. And then kind of like a communications expert to non-Telugu speaking technicians, because there's jargon that differs between the two industries. And because I participate in both, I'm kind of like the Rosetta Stone of crew members. So it's being able to communicate why certain processes are a certain way in the Indian system and not that way in the American system. I'll give you an example. We never shoot sync sound in India, ever. So
you never shoot sync sound?
Never, ever. Like that is a niche. That is a niche technique because the noise floor in India is just so massive. Like it's just so high. You're not gonna conceivably shoot on sync sound properly. But also because we have so many different languages, like these pan-Indian films. Like you go to Cinemark and find the same title in 4 different languages. Right?
Wow.
That doesn't mean that they shoot them in all 4 different languages. They have entirely separate dubbing industries that dub one film into different languages. So it's kind of meaningless to shoot it like sync sound because they're going to do it dub anyway. So that process has followed its way into America, where even if I'm doing a Telugu short film right here in Texas, they don't shoot sync sound. And they just grab like pilot audio on whatever mic they can. Yeah, and they'll then in post we go to like 50/50 studio, or we like rig up a dubbing studio in somebody's house and we just dub the whole film from beginning to end.
That's pretty crazy. That's a wild concept. I mean, because especially in the indie film world, like you so much rely on that sound engineer, and that's a different process, man.
Yeah,
that's old. That's the old school way of doing it. Like back in the day when they had the old reel-to-reel films and all that stuff going on, it was just too loud to get on-set sound, anyways.
Yep. And now I think what I love about the American filmmaking system is it's always like technology forward, where it's like whatever happens right in front of the lens is always incredible here. And I'm not knocking what happens in India. I think that's cool. But we come from again, we're such an old society. Like I think as storytellers, going all the way back to like almost our scripture level stories, right? The Upanishads are dialogues between 2 characters. Those are 3,500 years old on a conservative margin, right? So we've been telling stories for a long time. And so what you kind of find, and you find this very true for like the North Indian film that's like generally Hindi, there's a production house that's known for their set design, and that comes from a very like musical / Broadway type of philosophy, building out massive sets. But then in far East India, in Bengal, you'll find in West Bengal, you'll find filmmakers like Satyajit Ray that were very like parallel cinema, that were, they just let the camera observe the real world, right? He wasn't trying to build anything magnificent. But now we're getting the worlds of like RRR, Bahubali, and they're like larger than life stories. And, they could be, parallel to real life, or they could be just completely like what if, alternate universe type situations. So now like the current film, I think Bahubali really broke the American zeitgeist. And then it became RRR, which obviously winning the Oscar, everyone talked about. Right now, I just saw a Screen Rant interview drop for the director's next film called Varanasi, with Mahesh Babu, Priyanka Chopra, and Prithviraj there. So
Okay.
all three of these candidates are very, very massive stars back home in India. But in the global context of the conversation, like we're not talking about the same scale of like Brad Pitt or something like that. I think we're still on the up, right? Like there's still room for people to discover what Indian cinema has to offer. So this is where it's becoming really interesting to be in that almost conjuncture point where I can make an entirely Telugu short film about people trying to find Pokemon cards available before they get scalped, right? Which that's an entirely American context, but the language and the style of shooting is going to be completely international. And I think those stories are really interesting for me.
That is kind of cool. So how does it work? Do they come to you with a film idea, right? And then they bring the entire production here to Texas?
So how it normally happens is like they have an idea and they think, okay, we're going to pick whichever market that we think is going to suit the story either physically by geography or by what resources we would have available to us. I just came off of a 20-day shoot, which was an indie feature, but it was in the Bay Area, which is another stronghold for the international community that we have. The Bay Area has
the Bay Area of Houston?
No, sorry, Bay Area, California. So
California, so San Francisco,
right outside of SF, in that Fremont area. So we were shooting out there because like we as an Indian culture are very familiar with that because again that's where the hub of tech is and that's where all of us are sort of comfortable and knowledgeable. So the geography of Bay Area, California is something that everybody's kind of like, oh yay, right next to Statue of Liberty, everybody knows Golden Gate Bridge, right? But then Texas is now becoming our flag in the ground because culturally speaking, we're all kind of centralizing here. So like once you go north of Richardson, you're going to see an Indian restaurant on every corner, right? And when that becomes like what the identity of the space is becoming, then now we're thinking, okay, how can we shoot like how can we add the Pegasus, which is like the almost spirit animal of Dallas, right? How do we add the Traveling Man? How do we add the Underground? How do we add all these really cool spaces, geographically speaking, into our stories? And how do we tether that into this? So that's still being developed, right? They're still developing a relationship. And I think it's super cool that when I was growing up, I grew up in the States, and I grew up in Louisiana, and one of my favorite literature styles to read was Western literature. And the idea of the Lone Ranger and then the Indian alongside that had always been intriguing to me because I grew up everyone saying, oh, dude, the Indian. I'm like, all right, cool, let's read it. And then it turned out being natives. But
a different Indian,
at the same time, like if I think about what Dallas and Fort Worth has now become, it's literally just cowboys and Indians, right?
Right.
So it's sort of this almost like inside joke for me where it's like now in the modern age we're kind of revisiting that same trope but just like recontextualizing it, and I think that's something that I really find incredible. And I think that because we're culturally in our own echo chamber, there's a lot to be said of if we start working across that cultural boundary, we could find a lot that's in common. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to is films that try to open up what we consider normal in America. So I've been trying to pitch to get more cricket IP, which it's a growing sport here in North Texas, but because people don't really have an engagement with it, it's too complicated to just watch a game, right? But if we made a film about it, it kind of like, gets into that rhythm of like breaking down what the sport is and what it means. And I tried finding as many cricket movies as I could find, but there ain't that many. But
there's not that many.
But there's tons of Indian cricket movies that get made all the time, right? So I think that's kind of where I'm going with it, where if they find that, oh, this would be a really cool story, this is something we know, love, and the format is very popular for us, but it would be really interesting to find it in an American context, that's when they hit me up and they're like, hey, can you source talent? Can you source locations? Can you help us develop the storyline a little bit more synchronously with like the current moment or culture? So it's that, right? I have the relationships locally, I have the crew people locally, and thankfully the local independent community in Texas has been so kind to let me in. I'm a guest to the culture, but I love working with them, and I've worked with multiple filmmakers, and now when I'm going back out into, because I spent 3 years doing Indian film, now I'm coming back into my American space, having built my equity from coast to coast in the international space. Now I'm coming back saying, hey guys, like it's not just me anymore, it's an army of us, and we really want to work, so let's figure out what we could do. And I think that's what it is. It's really building independent communities and banding them together to really get independent film out there.
That's awesome. Yeah, and from an indie standpoint, when you start to utilize the the international community
Yeah.
in your indie filmmaking process, your sales go a lot longer, a lot
Yeah.
further. I
Yeah.
think a lot of times, like, we make films here in Texas, America, whatever, low budget, however the budget is. It's really difficult to get your voice out there. It's really difficult to break through the noise if it's like an American comedy, for instance. So we got a movie coming out later this year called Pickleball, and it's comedy, and it's very funny, but it's very difficult. Like, we can't find the international sales. So I think utilizing international communities in that regard is almost like a safe hedge, for the future sales of your film.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting in that regard is you kind of A/B test within America, and then if the local international community buzzes about your film, then you get distributors at the home country that are interested in picking up the IP because they're getting buzz from here, right? If the Telugu community really does talk about something here, chances that like Hyderabad finds out about it is like 90%, right? But again, we really have.
Who's that? Is that the big distribution agency in India?
No, Hyderabad is just the city, right? It's like saying
Gotcha.
if you make something in Texas, Los Angeles finds out about it, right? So it's all the distributors because the industry just hubs there, right? And that's just one language, right? Like, there's multiple other language industries within India. So if any one film does really well out here, we're going to find out about it back at home, right? And then that gets distributors interested, that gets sales agents interested, because then they option the film for dubbing, and the whole 9 yards happens. But it's about making sure that the local community engages with your content first. And I think that's such an interesting way of tackling it, because I come from obviously the Indian American standpoint, but this is true for every other country, like the Chinese American, Japanese American, Korean American, European American, African American, all these various subcategories and subcultures and industries, they're all operating in the US. And I think that is a beautiful, beautiful thing for the American market in terms of media, because you don't have to have the next, Godfather per se. It doesn't have to be an all-American classic at the onset. It could be a film that you make for a niche community that gets you global visibility in terms of publication that then goes back to LA. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and
for sure.
that's a stack that I've been thinking about of recent. So I just see that that's going to be the rhythm of what goes on into the future.
Yeah, man, I can see that. I mean, you almost kind of see that too in LA with a lot of movies that are coming out, even that are American movies that are a little bit more internationally driven. They'll go overseas to film, or they'll pull their crew from different countries and different things like that. Right. And some of that is probably because of the unions and things that kind of make productions, they hamstring productions in a lot of ways, especially the indie film productions. But yeah, utilizing the international audience, I think, also helps, again, go back to sales. That's like the most important thing. Like, you take, $500,000 from an investor, you got to figure out how to make that money back. And so international sales, I think, is a brilliant way to go about it. What typical budgets are you operating in?
I think features will definitely be like in that 70 to 200 range, which that's nowhere near where it normally is for back home in India. But if a big studio is coming in and doing just a scene, right, or they're shooting just like a song, right, because in Indian movies it's like we have a musical hyphenate genre with everything that we make. So we have our songs, and if you want to shoot in foreign lands and get really interesting geographies in your backdrop, you're going to shoot songs in international spaces. So if you're just doing that, you could get a little bit more budget just because they want grander visuals for those types of things. But if they're just shooting a scene and they just need it to be physically in America, then they're going to be spending a lot less. But that's just for scenes. If it's for films that are being made here, you're for a whole film compared to a scene, it might be around similar budgets. But the question then becomes, do we try to get our at-home audience to care about this first, or do we try to get the local audience to care about this first? And my answer this entire time has been engage your local audience, right? Because I know that, for example, when we sent Don't Smoke Bro to Diff Shorts, they were able to enjoy the film even though it was an international. It had international sensitivities, so that tells me the American audience is down to watch international content as long as you can put it in front of them. So I've been telling my international filmmakers, don't be afraid to shoot an entirely international film and put it in front of the American audience, because chances are they will check it out if they dig the concept. So
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like if we can get more audience interested in our content, then the budgets will actually increase because we become then the new market for the at-home studios to like, get into. So I'm getting them involved in that kind of a process.
that's pretty cool. Yeah, so even at feature film level, you're operating between $70,000 to $200,000
For
like
films that
film.
have like full budgets, yeah, that's typically what we're spending on, and obviously we'll try to make a $20,000 feature every now and then, but
Yeah.
it's for the
There is a market for the $20,000 feature. Now I will say, because I worked on those, and
Yeah.
if you go through my IMDb credits, you'll find dozens of $20,000 features.
Right.
Not great, not my favorite,
Right.
but that's the struggle, man, is you don't get the time, you don't get the crew, everybody's wearing like 6 hats, on
Right.
set. Nobody's really getting paid a full day rate. But you're just doing it for passion or out of love for telling stories, you know what I
Right.
mean? The caveat to the $20,000 film is like your poster has to be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
You make that poster really good, people click on it or they buy it or they rent it or whatever, and then it's easier to make your money back. Yeah, there's a guy. It's actually the same guy who did Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, the ITN. That's his model, right? It's the super low budgets. Let's get them on Walmart shelves. Do they even still sell DVDs at Walmart?
I think they do, but I don't remember
So?
the last time I've bought a DVD.
I know, it's been so long. A lot of the movies that I made, like every time I'd go into Walmart, I'd see like 2 or 3 of them on the shelf. I'm like, oh my gosh, all these movies are here. It's so hilarious, and I knew exactly what it would take to make them. But on a $20,000 budget, just because like I'm also catering to audiences who probably don't know about the indie filmmaking process, right? On a $20,000 film budget, what is it like on a set like that?
Like you're saying, everybody's wearing like multiple hats on set. I
Yeah.
think in the same way that because I was just on a short film with more budget, but like it's not a feature. I was doing, I think I was swinging between talent and like 3 different crew positions, just
Wow.
because that's what the set needed to function.
So you were
properly.
acting and doing crew.
Yeah.
So
When
we did that a little bit on pickleball, which is so funny because that's we had our gaffer. And he reached out to me before the movie. I mean, again, this is a little bit more of a bigger budget movie, but he reached out to me before and goes, "Hey, if there's any roles, I'd be willing to double dip on set." And I was like, "Sure." And I had this role in mind for Bob, who was this random guy that was playing pickleball in the opening scene, but he was so good on camera. He's just, I don't know if you know who Tim Booble is.
I do.
Yeah. He was
yeah.
so good on camera that I was like, dude, we gotta stretch this character out a little bit. He's just like this big giant redhead dude. Literally looks like a Viking.
Yeah.
But you put a pickleball paddle in a Viking, right? It's
Yeah.
the funniest look ever. But,
Just the size difference of the thing might be just hilarious.
yeah. So we did a little bit of that. We've had some of that,
Yeah.
in roles past. Sometimes my AD will come to me and and she'll be like, "Hey, I'd like to act or whatever." It is tougher when it's an AD role, of course. But what were the roles that you were covering on set?
I was in art department, so when I wasn't
Okay.
shooting, I was doing setups between, and then I was swinging for grip, and then I would do a little bit of ADing.
Yeah.
Just like
Gotta
wrangling
look-
extra talent, that because I was also making sure that like they weren't, because what happens in these independent spaces is you get friends and family to be your extras, and like
Yeah.
this might be their first time on set, they might get a little excited, be a little bit of a chatty Cathy. Meanwhile, we're trying to roll sync, and we're like, hey guys, we can hear you.
Keep it down.
Yeah, so they kind of had me be this weird like espionage where it's like, hey, entertain them but do it quietly. So
Yeah.
just brought 2 decks of cards. We played 13-card rummy quietly.
There you go.
That usually does it.
That's awesome. Yeah, we had some of that too on set when we were doing pickleball. We brought in a bunch of pros for the pickleball tournament, and after like we wrapped out the pros, which we only needed them for like 30 minutes at a time. It's like, hey,
Right.
just a couple exchanges, let the guys score on you, you're out of here. And they wanted to meet the cast, meet the crew, all this other stuff. And
Yeah.
my AD steps in and is like, if you guys don't get out of here. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm glad you did this, not me, because I
Yeah.
was already stressed on the time.
Yeah. But
And
that's also
yeah, go for it.
no, but that makes for great like BTS content. Like, whenever you're documenting like people like that from outside of the film space meeting like, your independent film,
Yeah.
it adds more edification towards the project because you're doing it alongside the champions of a particular culture, here being pickleball. And I think that is what filmmaking is inherently all about. Like, if you're not telling the story of a community, it's difficult to get those people to care.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are kind of missing, where studios have these phenomenal ideas, but they're not at this point, they're kind of just saying, oh, if you're in studio space, if you're in Hollywood proper, like, that's all we need. And I'm not going to knock that because that's worked conventionally speaking, but I think integrating champions of a space makes the space care more about the art. So phenomenal strategy there. I always love bringing real world, they're like cameos, right? They're not like Hollywood actor cameos, but they are champions of said space cameos. And I think that's worth it so much more.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It does make things difficult because they don't understand the workings of a space, and especially if you're working on an independent film, like that with a set limited budget. A lot of times you're shooting way more pages than you should in a day,
Yeah.
and I say then you should.
Yeah.
And that, like the struggle of the budgeting of time and things like that. But if you're working on a $20,000 film or even $100,000, $200,000 film, odds are you're not doing SAG, right?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. And so you have a little bit more freedom in that regard. If you're doing a SAG film, it does, which is what Pickleball was. It does make things pretty difficult because it's like, I've got to get these actors out of here before 5 p.m. or I'm getting penalized. So you guys go have your conversation at lunch. And
this is a question from like me as a very novice filmmaker. I haven't done quite as much work as you have, but coming from a perspective where, okay, I understand the value of unions, I understand the value of SAG, I understand, even though you're doing a low budget film, still doing a low budget union film is it adds a lot of like notoriety, prestige, it adds edification, right? I completely understand that. But in a day and age where you're getting digital aggregators like, man, like, you could make a film and upload it on Film Hub as an indie.
Or
and
YouTube. You can go straight to YouTube if you want.
Straight to YouTube. Build an audience, build a community. So like I don't know anybody who's really asked me, like, other than filmmakers and people that participate in the space, regular audience people don't really ask me what SAG is. They don't really say, hey, are you a SAG film? Are you not a SAG film? So it seems like all that edification is good for like the industry aspect of it, but going straight to general audiences, do you find that they generally care?
No, they don't. And to be honest with you, like the only reason why you would go SAG film as an independent production is to get a name. Is to get somebody who can help you sell the film. Otherwise, I don't see the need for it. And I know I'll probably get a little bit of flack from actors who are in the SAG community on this. But in all honesty, like if you think like the terms and conditions for like a union, like SAG or even a crew union or writers union, all that stuff, those were actually built for big box studios. So when they trickle down into the indie film community, it really bleeds the budget dry. And I know the intent for it was to make sure that everybody gets what they're worth. But at the end of the day, it's like we're out of money and we can't even finish this movie.
Right.
So I get, why it's there and safeguards and processes and all that stuff.
Right.
It's tough, man. It's tough out there. It's tough for writers. It's tough for producers. It's tough for everybody in general. And actors, I know they're out there searching for anything and everything they can get their hands on because they just need to be in stuff. They need to be in front of cameras. Yeah. And so having a union behind them that helps make sure that they get what they're worth, I get it. But at the same time, you're operating $100,000, $200,000 film, but I have to pay you X amount of money plus a food stipend plus, travel days plus all this stuff. it really eats into the budget. And I know there's some dissenters out there that'll be like, well, if you don't have the budget to do that, you don't have the budget to make a movie. Well, that's not necessarily true. Right. I do have a budget to make a movie. I just don't have a budget to pay for all the frills and extras that a union requires.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And now, that respects, yeah, go for it.
No, but now if you've got $1 million budget, I get it. Yeah, right. Million plus, I get it. You're probably not going to be able to get, your Brad Pitt or your, Robert De Niro or somebody like that, right? You're not going to be able to get some major star, but you're going to get some people that you can probably find in the fringes that are going to help you sell the movie on the back end. But yeah, it's tough with all that for sure. And if you're making a $20,000 film, definitely don't go SAG.
Right. And I think there's value in the union kind of putting up those red tape measures for valuing the artist, right? I completely I admire the union for doing that because it protects the work of artists like myself and like you. So that's great stuff, right? But I think during the pandemic we started seeing that they were starting to allow influencers to join SAG.
Oh yeah.
And I on one hand I'm like, okay, so it's a different craft. I know that influencers are entertainers. I get it. And I do get that, they do deserve, for the audiences that they're entertaining, I get that they deserve what they deserve. I'm not taking anything from that, but I very much think about, is this partly because they're kind of keeping up with the innovation of technology? Because if that's the case, then suddenly we ask ourselves the question, like, YouTube is the greatest distributor, bar none. Right. But I don't think anybody's watching YouTube quite the same way they did back in like 2009, 2010, because it was still hot on the scene back in 2008. Right. Everybody could watch 5 hours of YouTube and know all the trending videos off cuff. Right. Today, you watch 5 hours of YouTube, you're not even scratching the surface. Right.
Yeah. You have no clue. Yeah.
It's getting niche. So now we're starting to see this like same thing happen on Instagram and TikTok, where vertical media, micro dramas are becoming the new, like, if you have the number one trending microdrama, everybody knows who you are, right?
Interesting.
That's becoming, and now it's sectioned off to various communities. For example, there's an entire slate of South Indian influencers in Texas that none of my American friends know of, but every single person that comes out of the tech space, they're like, oh yeah, we watch that content creator all the time. So there's a slate of people that, you're talking about, like, what was PewDiePie back in the day now has like its iteration on the cell phone. And you have other American content creators that do the same thing. They make like scenes and drop them as like, what ifs, right? Like a 3-minute, you could call that like a short film or like a proof of concept. If one scene goes viral, if they're able to make a product that then goes straight to vertical distribution and they get a lot of audience engagement, now you have an audience for an IP that then you could go to a production studio or an indie producer and say, hey, here's an audience that I have for a 3-minute thing I was able to shoot in my garage. Let's scale it up and bring it into something that's much larger, if that's something that you do by genre. And I think that's been a very interesting thing for me to think about, because if you're leading with audience attention first, almost every studio is interested in what you have going on.
That's 100% true. So if you think of like, you go back to the 2008, 2009 YouTube era days, right? There's a YouTuber, Markiplier, and he just came out with his movie Iron Lung. Yeah. And it's so funny. I mean, I've followed him for a while. He's been trying to go from like being a video game YouTuber to now a filmmaker. I was watching all the videos of him on Corridor Digital while he was learning visual effects and all the things.
Right.
Now he's applying everything and directed his first feature film. Was able to secure a budget, which of course, he's made so much money from YouTube. I guarantee you finding an investor after you've accumulated so much wealth from your own name and audience, right, is a lot easier than somebody like me who's, maybe got like a couple thousand followers on Instagram.
Right.
And, he's got millions and millions, right? And so it's so crazy to think like, it's also like hindsight is 2020, right? This is what we should have been doing back in 2009.
Yeah.
We should have been building our audience. We should have been doing this from the get-go, because now when we get ready to release a movie, like we released A Porch Pirates, which was my directorial debut,
Right.
it would have already had a built-in audience. You know,
Yeah.
I would have been able to pull in more investors to get involved, because they already know millions of people are going to watch this because your
Right.
name is on it.
Right.
And there is an avenue to that, especially like you said in the vertical market. What's crazy is I've also been seeing, like, in the vertical markets, is people are actually making the shorts, right? But they're like one scene at a time, but it's like a whole series, and they're apps on your phone.
Yeah.
I actually had a buddy reach out to me and asked if I wanted to be a part of some of the ones that he was doing. I don't have the time right now, because we're getting ready. You know, we're about to pitch a TV show. We're doing all this crazy stuff right now. So it's really difficult for me to kind of jump into that side of the world.
Yeah.
But it's crazy to think, and I think as an indie filmmaker, you have to learn to evolve and to kind of roll with the waves of the ocean. And I've been noticing, especially on my feed, is just like generic narrative film work across the board. And it's not just in Texas, but it's also in LA. It's across the board, but just general narrative film work isn't as prevalent as it once was, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, when everybody was really hammering and trying to get, a movie out or trying to get a deal. I think a lot of it is also realizing that there's just so many people doing it.
Yeah.
And there's so many, there's so much money you can put into a movie and then realize you didn't come close to making your money back. That risk is very much there.
Yeah.
So being creative with like a vertical, or being creative by trying to grow an internet audience, that is basically, it's your built-in CRM, right? Your built-in customer retention marketing technique that you can, once you get ready to release a film, now all you have to do is send out a Facebook post, right? You've got thousands of people already ready to watch, chomping at the bits.
Right.
There is a world there. I feel like that's where everything's just kind of heading.
100%. And I think the people that really cracked that code, I think A24 with Spring Breakers, when they were doing their marketing, they relied exclusively on Facebook way back in the day, which was like, at that moment, it was like the new social media app of the world. And they peanuts compared to what traditional P&A would be for budgets. But I think because they were able to leverage newer social graphs of attention and be able to find places where if they could talk about their film a certain way in a certain space, they get all of the same attention, but at much cheaper cost, because it's not tried and true method. It's very experimental. I think they figured it out as distributors. Now we as filmmakers have to think a lot like that, where the now modern innovation is studios are looking for people that have audiences that they could like basically emanate into their IP, where either that's going to come from prestige festival runs and you're like, oh, you're like, the guy that won Sundance, so obviously we want you on XYZ project because that's bankable, or you're a talent that's been on the internet that just has like a wide audience and they're like, oh, we want you on our project because you add more visibility to this particular conflict or this particular culture space. We want you in the film. So I think that's one of those two ways is typically how I'm kind of seeing this kind of go. And this prerequisite, you have to be good at your craft. Like that's not up for debate. But if you're able to build your fan base and build your audience outside of traditional studio spaces and outside of traditional methods, I think you become like the hot option for the, like, you're measuring against a known actor that might be like B tier versus a non-tiered actor that just has a great relationship to an audience. If that audience maps to your film identity, then that's very much in consideration. And I think that comes back to, if you're dealing with international independent filmmakers, we're very removed from studio world. Like we don't participate in any of that conversation. So that's why we're able to tap into an audience that nobody else otherwise is even considering. So, and that's where I'm really trying to get that conversation going, because we're saying, listen, we're willing to watch American stuff. You just got to like tell us that it exists. And then conversely, the American side's telling me the same thing. We're willing to watch Indian stuff. You just got to tell us it exists. So what better way to tell them it exists than, have them both work on one project together and make it happen.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And that is also the hard thing, is breaking through the noise and having people realize that it even exists. Movies like yours and mine just kind of sitting at a budget sub $1 million, right? The hardest thing is like what most people say. I think like your P&A, like if you're going to go to a theater, right, and you've got let's just say $1 million movie that you want to go into the theaters, you need to also spend $1 million in prints and advertising in order for people to just know that movie exists.
Yep.
Which is crazy.
Yep.
And that's the tough thing too, because you talked about Film Hub earlier. That's, in my experience, the tough thing about going straight to Film Hub rather than like a traditional, distribution route. And I'm not talking about indie distribution, because indie distribution, you're going to find yourself basically in the same route as Film Hub, unless you find this just sweetheart deal that really works out for everybody. But if you go to like a Film Hub or whatever, and it's going to get picked up. It's going to get picked up by Amazon. It's going to get picked up by Apple, Tubi, all that stuff. And people knock Tubi, but you know what? Tubi pays more than most, right? Tubi and YouTube usually pays more than most. You're now relying on your marketing dollars. You're relying on your social media presence. You're relying on posts, everything that you shot behind the scenes on set. You're relying on those things in order to sell your film. And if you already don't have a built-in audience, it makes things a lot more difficult. And now you're pushing your marketing dollars. In my experience, it's usually been 1-to-1. You know what I mean? So if you got like a $100,000 movie and you put $30,000 into marketing, you're going to see a $30,000 return on your digital distribution, but you didn't make any money because you put $30,000 into Facebook marketing. But yeah, man, utilizing an international audience. I think that's too, one of the things too that they talk about is genres, right? And genres really help with a lot of the international thing. And I think one of the genres that I've been doing a lot lately, which has been really difficult to get traction here in America, is the comedy genre, because comedy doesn't quite travel well in places like India, or like American comedies just don't pick up very well. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, because culturally, your jokes are always contextualized to the cultural, like almost like average, right? So something that's happening in America that could be a phenomenal joke, if you take it outside of America, that joke might not land, right? So when they dub it over, they're going to have to change the context of what the joke is about to be relevant to that audience, right? I watched Frozen dubbed into Telugu. And it was the most hilarious thing in the world. I laughed at both versions of it because the joke, it's like getting an entirely new joke hit you, right? Okay. Because the context of it, I also know some of the actors like who voiced some of the characters, and just their personas that had like really mapped well to those characters. So like there's an entire new science to what you do with comedy when it leaves the host country, like what audience you originally intended to write for. But I think that there's the benefit you have in America is a global country in which anything that happens here, you could make a joke about anywhere else in the world. And like 50% of the time, people are still going to be aware of what you're talking about, right? So like that's still something that goes on really well. And I think now we're getting into really interesting things with like the Korean culture as well, because like a lot of the K-dramas and K-pop is now like, getting a big uptick on the internet. So as more global audiences are consuming one culture graph's sort of media, you can reference something within that and then it works, right? I think the coolest thing for me to watch when I was a kid, watching anime and being like in that nerd pocket, you got dunked on. Like if you didn't play sports and you went to middle school, you were like, nah, dude, you're Dungeons and Dragons worthy. But post what Hollywood did with Marvel and DC, suddenly the comic book culture is cool. Suddenly being into anime is cool. Suddenly, like, you're watching what happened with like Demon Slayer over at the box office. They made Mugen Train for $15 million and did $500 at the box office. Clearly, audiences are showing up, and it's much cheaper to be making these anime films than it is making like live actions. And more often than not, you're finding that in India itself, one of the more popular names in terms of talent and recognized faces is Naruto Uzumaki. Why is there a Japanese animated face, one of the more popular faces in India? It's just, there's so much ease of access when it's like one face in multiple languages. And now, like, that's all growing in a way that we can't stop anymore. So you're starting to see these characters become more relevant than the human faces that would be of like traditional studio world, right? Like, yes, there are still superstars. But if you compare how popular a human is compared to how popular like the Green Ranger from Power Rangers is, like it's not even the same kind of comparison, right?
Speaking of which, R.I.P. Green Ranger. Was from Dallas.
And I think about characters like that because, you know, a dream of mine was always to play, growing up, I always wanted to play Indian characters from American IP. And I wasn't around when this was around, but maybe you might remember. Johnny Quest is one of those long-held American cartoons that everybody loved, where the title characters, one was obviously Johnny Quest, but his brother was Harjit Singh. And that was a character with a backstory from all over India. Just if you take a look at his attire, the way he behaves, his last name, all of that is from all over the space. And I was like, I'd love to play that character. But that's comfortably parked in like the HBO, I think now has it vaulted. Okay. And those comics are still coming out. So the character's like 3 generations in, and none of the international people know anything about Harjit Singh, but all the Americans do. And that for me has been interesting because that's 3 generations of American fan base for one character. And he's not a superstar, he's a character. So that to me is kind of the value find. If you can develop character or be optioned to play some of these characters, you get immediate love, immediate upside. Robert Downey Jr., God bless him, he is Iron Man, in my opinion. He is Tony Stark. Like, there's an difference for me. Sarah Finn, the casting director for Marvel, does a knockout job every single time. So when I saw Iron Man, I remember reading all those comics and I was like, this is perfect. And I, you know, Jon Favreau,
Favreau is a monster.
One of the best directors. Yeah, he's
a monster.
He builds wonderful story worlds, and I think that's what it is. Like, as an independent filmmaker, you won't have that level of budget, you won't have that level of story, but you can tap into story worlds that already exist, that already have a culture, that already have something. So add your cinematic like donation to that world, right? Like, be able to create something for that base, for that fan base, because not every world has cinema, right? Before Dungeons and Dragons was done by the studios, Dungeons and Dragons was around all the time, but very few, I guess, independently made films really broke the zeitgeist with that. But I think that's true. Like, for your pickleball film, I think it's Ben Stiller who's doing a pickleball.
Yeah, he's coming out with one.
Right. So, like, you see that Hollywood, even studios, are kind of picking their spaces and trying to create like the visual iteration of stories. It's the same as what they did with books, right? Now Hollywood's even optioning narrative podcasts and Wattpad stories, right?
I've seen that. Isn't that crazy? Like, if you go on Netflix, like if you scroll, there's a whole podcast section on Netflix now, which is nuts. The medium is definitely changing. But yeah, man, go finish what you're saying.
I think it just, like, whenever you find stories that have an audience or cultures that have an audience, being able to create the movie service for that community is really where the secret sauce is. And for me, being able to merge my local Texas filmmaking community with my international audience that comes with generations upon generations of backstory and, like, you know, strife and struggle that, like, you know, we can always talk about in either English or our international language. That's currently what's happening in this moment in filmmaking today for us. So that we truly believe in this merger of cultures.
Yeah. No, I can see it. I mean, Indian films, like, I mean, you think of like some of the biggest films made, right? Is Slumdog Millionaire, Life of Pi, like those are some of the biggest films ever made, and America has really adopted that, or adopted a love for the Indian culture in a lot of different ways, which is really cool. And then you did mention, you know, like there's a huge Indian culture just north of DFW, which I've noticed as well. You know, you go up there and it's fairly large. I've actually done some promos for some was it like it's secondary learning centers where a lot of them are actually owned by just Indian families, and just it's pretty cool to see, to be honest with you. It's really cool. I love the integration of the different cultures and things like that.
Yeah.
But I also love to see it in the film industry.
Yeah.
Which is really, really cool, and super unique.
I think what we're all celebrating right now is as much as right now, usually what happens is you get very popular cultures that happen, and I think the largest common denominator in America would be tech, right? And you get films like Social Network that come out, and there still haven't been a lot of those tech movies. There have been tons of films like Margin Call and like The Big Short that talk about financial crises or like moments in American history, but nothing really, like, I haven't seen a film, now maybe I'm not looking in the right space, but like I haven't seen a short film that talks about the life of a VC, or like what happens when you make a startup unicorn and you get optioned and you get in the news for like, hey, you got a $700 million exit. Like what happens to your life then, right? If you just become an overnight like multimillionaire. I don't think that has happened quite yet, but I think that's a feasible story to tell because that's now possible, right?
Yeah. And they covered that though. They did cover that though in Silicon Valley. HBO
They did.
Series.
Yeah. And I think we're going to get more of those procedurals. Like I think that's also a great place to look because we still have like, the true crime, we still have those. But insofar as like what's going on with streamers, I think they're trying to make everything cinema grade, where we've lost the sitcom. Like that doesn't exist anymore. Everything's now cinema, but it's like 15-act structure, and you just get like, whatever's going on over a longer period of time, and you're making hour-long episodes without any breaks, really. And you're getting these bingeable series with cinema-grade visuals, and I guess that's what's making it expensive, because back in the day, it used to be just about the writing, right? That was what really got everybody in and stuck around, and that rewatch value really happened because of like the culture competence. I want to see that come back, and I think that's going to come back in the indie world more than studio world.
I think
that's
it will
what I'm
too.
super excited about.
I think it will too. I think, and you're starting to see some of that. I mean, I went into the theater the other day, and you go into the theaters like, a year ago, even a year and a half ago, all you would see comic book movies, sequels, all that stuff. We went to the theater the other day, and it was all original films. We watched Send Help, Sam Raimi's Send Help. And dude, phenomenal movie. Like, it was so good. I don't want to spoil that movie, but it's great to see like original content now being on the forefront again. Whereas the indies have been kind of carrying that torch for the longest time, because obviously they don't have connection to like major IP. They can't make an Iron Man 4. So you're kind of limited to your originality. But that's where that's the origin of filmmaking, and I think a lot of studios just got comfortable because they knew they could cash in on Frozen 3, or Moana 2, or let's take our big IP and make it live action. I'm kind of knocking on Disney here a little bit, but just the lack of originality from the box office studios. I think people were getting sick of it and started turning to indies for a little bit, and now the studios have kind of picked up on it, and now they're pushing their indie side of things. Right. But you did make mention the series, which I want to talk about. That is something I would love to do, is a narrative series. Now I'm working on a TV series that's not narrative, it's reality based, but a narrative based TV series I think would be so fun in that you get to spend so much more time with your character. Whereas like a 90-minute movie, right? As an indie film, you've got only so much time you have to develop this character. You only got so much time to understand, the backstory and all this stuff of this guy. And a lot of times it has to just be done with dialogue, and you have to move on to the next little segment of the movie, or you risk running into a 2-hour movie, which most distribution agents, they don't want a 2-hour indie movie. They want it at 90 minutes. But yeah, with a series, man, it would be fun to be able to just pick apart those characters and understand
Yeah.
them a little bit better.
And I think that really comes down to like what is the culture of your specific geography, your specific space, because an indie series that comes out of North Texas is going to look drastically different from what's going on in Tampa, Florida. And that's going to look different from what's going on in Manhattan. And that's going to look different from Chicago and Bay Area and LA. So I want that diversity of content, right? Because I want to be able to see all of these areas of the US, and I want to see what they're focusing on. I want to see what their problems are. I want to see what their strengths are. I want to see what's going on in those moments, because whenever I travel around the US for my international work, I'm still able, like, it's still America. So when I go, when I'm not shooting on set and I have a day off and I'm just going around, like, seeing what's going on in that city, it doesn't look or feel the same. And I'm like, this is an identity. The shows that are based here, the things that would be easy to shoot here are going to look very, very different from what's easy to shoot in North Texas. So I'm very long on, I think, independent series is going to be the way to go. And I remember, I think it was the top of 2025, Neil Mohan, who's the sitting CEO of YouTube, he was saying that we're going to make it easier for independent creators to kind of go up against what would be like a Netflix UI. We're going to make it easier for them to make cinematic series so that they can distribute over YouTube. So I was like, thank you, because now this gives independent creators a lot more tools. And they were telling us, I think they're also doing like you were saying about the tutorials in Hindi. I think they're also doing, like the same way Meta did instant translation. They're doing use AI to translate. YouTube is going to also provide that. So you're going to get multilingual, simul AI translation, voiceover, and lip syncing. Like they're going to use AI.
That is crazy.
And all of those tools are going to be provided by YouTube over the next couple of years. And that, like, so if you shoot something in English and it has culture competency across multiple demographics, I think you're going to start getting a lot more international audience coming off of YouTube, and then that makes you a global filmmaker that then studios would then option. I think that's going to be the new wave. So I'm very, very happy to see that that's going to be what's happening at the technological innovation level. So all we have to do as independent filmmakers is just tell a good story. I think the tools are going to be there to cater to us.
Man, that's crazy to think about, because I didn't know that about YouTube, and that's something that I was even looking into for films that we had released. It's like, how do I get, HeyGen is an AI service that I use a lot. We're working on a docuseries utilizing HeyGen, which we're doing a lot of lip sync stuff, recreating people as AI characters and different things like that. But, when I reached out to him about a year and a half ago, I was like, hey, is there a world where, because they have translation services on the site, is there a world where I could upload a film and translate the entire film? And they said, we're just not there yet. But if you could just imagine like a YouTube, you do your own YouTube series, and then it's translated worldwide. That is huge.
Well, they have huge. Arguably one of the largest data sets in terms of language and footage libraries in the world, right? Like
they have to.
And they have all the computing power behind them because it's Google backed, it's Alphabet backed. Like you're coming out with like quantum chips. Like they're going to be able to have the power to do all of this. So I'm very, very excited at this conjuncture point of technology and filmmaking, because I think there's just so many more tools available to an independent filmmaker. It's just knowing your competency and comfort level with all of that, and then just having a story and knowing where your audience is. I think obviously the third part of that is the most difficult portion, but if you know your story really, really well and you can use the tools to like push your content out to the right audience member, I think now there's like this really interesting way where you can tether the short. Like if you have a YouTube video, you can make the YouTube short, right? You can cook in the metadata where it says this short is from this parent video, and if somebody watches the whole of the short, it recommends the whole of the video to them. So it's like it's kind of like sending out little scenes and being like, hey, will you watch the whole of the scene?
And you never have to leave the site.
You don't. And that's just interesting to me.
Yeah, and that goes back to if you have already curated your audience, right?
Yeah.
If you have a page with like no subscribers, it's going to be very difficult, right? But if you have thousands of people already looking at your content, I mean, the algorithms and the things they're going to push it naturally, just because if people are looking at it, they're going to keep shoving it to people for more people to look at. So that it does go back to what we talked about at the very beginning, is you have to almost grow your individual community. You have to grow your individual audience as a filmmaker, as Anil filmmaker, right?
Right.
As Jeff Hamm, director, like all this, you have to have an audience. You have to have people that are paying attention to you. But all that to say, that's a good segue. Anil, why don't you go ahead and tell us what's your social handles and where can we find you?
So on Instagram, it's just at Anil Sankaramanchi. It's just my first and last name together. That's currently where I'm living. Like, if you need to reach out to me, hit me up on that. That's where usually I'm posting where I'm going to be, what I'm going to be doing. We do have like filmmaker mixers that we do for the independent international community. I'm kind of spearheading that along with a couple of peers of mine in the space. But you will catch me at like a diff mixer, or you will catch me at a DPA event, or you will catch me at any one of these other mixers. So like, if you guys are interested in working together, Jeff, I want to work with you. So like, let me know where you're at these days. But yeah,
I'm traveling, man.
Hey, where are you at right now?
Crazy. What's crazy is with the podcast is Howdywood. I've done so much more work outside of Texas in the past year and a half. Man, yeah, I can't wait to do another project back home. It's just it's been a while.
Hey, brother, don't worry. We'll get you back here. We'll get you on an Indian set. How about that?
Yeah, dude, I would love it, man. That would be a lot of fun. Especially if y'all are doing those music videos, because those are crazy.
Those are fun. We just did. I'll send you one. It's called the Galata, but I'll send it to you. It's like a crazy number. We'll do. So yeah, just hit me up on Instagram, and that's where I'm at.
That's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. This is the Howdywood podcast. Keep up with Anil as he continues on with his filmmaking journey. And then you can also follow us. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe for more content like this. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much.